Awesome, awesome, awesome. 7 o'clock, everybody. Welcome to the WEconnect Recovery Live Friday Night Speaker Series. Last month, WEconnect Health Management launched this Friday Night Speaker Series to continue to bring the recovery community together during the COVID-19 crisis. Our goal with WEconnect Recovery Live is to have everyone digitally in one place to hear from and be inspired by speakers who are living a full life in recovery and share their personal stories and one you know that might benefit. My name is Murphy Jensen, and I'm in long-term recovery from substance use disorder. I'm also a former professional tennis player and French Open champion and co-founder at WEconnect Health Management. I'll be hosting the meeting tonight. The WEconnect Recovery Live Talk is open to anyone dealing with substance use, mental health concerns, disordered eating, as well as any other quality of life concerns or behavioral health disorders. Now that's a mouthful for me. We also welcome those who support the recovery lifestyle and those who have been impacted by recovery support groups. This is not a 12-step meeting and has no affiliation with any recovery program or any other recovery support group. Our guest speaker tonight is the great Michelle Reilly. We are so grateful and thankful to have her here for our second meeting in this series. Michelle is a woman in recovery and a leader in our lead peer recovery support specialist at WEconnect Health Management. She describes herself, this is my favorite part, as being on the never-ending journey of recovering her true self. And she's passionate about working with others to forge their own path. When she entered the recovery services field, her background is in disability services and autism advocacy, and advocacy became the foundation for her approach to peer support, which is that every human being has the ability to live a self-directed life, including defining recovery for themselves. Tonight, Michelle is going to be sharing about her path to wholeheartedly braving recovery. Now, before we get started, Michelle, this is for everyone in attendance. If you have questions for Michelle after her talk, she'll speak for 20, 30 minutes or until one of us passes out. If you have questions, drop them in the chat box and we'll get to those at 1/2 or 20 to the end of the hour. And Michelle will answer those questions. Without further ado, please welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Michelle Reilly.
Thank you, Murphy. I am wholeheartedly grateful to be here. Just gonna take a breath and center in. All right, so tonight, well, I guess to start off, my name's Michelle. I'm a woman in recovery. I use she, her, or they, them pronouns. I'm honored to be here with each and every one of you. Thank you for showing up for my recovery and for our recovery community here at WEconnect. Tonight, I'm going to talk about, like Murphy said, the story of finding myself, or finding recovery. I always struggled with a definition of recovery. I knew in my gut that what I was taught just didn't quite fit for me, and I didn't fit into it. I nearly got kicked out of the last IOP I was in because I was fighting with the lead psychologist there about the fact that I actually straight up refused to identify as an addict or an alcoholic in our groups. I just wouldn't do it. I was just, from my frame of reference, I was just me. And so I would introduce myself as, hi, I'm Michelle, and I'm a person who struggles with it all. Because I do. I identify today as a person in recovery from substance use, mental health concerns, disordered eating, self-harm and what we commonly call codependency. But that adamant assertion that I was not going to be labeled was not well received. But my sense of what recovery could be was always bigger than just some reductive or stigmatizing label. When I go to AA, when I go to NA, I gladly identify as an addict or an alcoholic. It makes me feel a part of, like I belong somewhere. And I've really struggled to belong my whole life. There's a Maya Angelou quote, you are only free when you realize you belong no place. You belong every place, no place at all. The price is high, the reward is great. And for me, that quote really encapsulates the spirit of a recovery journey in a recovery community, right? We do it alone together. We belong to ourselves and to this group, and we don't belong, or we do. And that's why in 12-step groups, people so wholeheartedly cherish those identifiers, right? It builds unity, it empowers folks. But that's not how I will identify outside of those meetings. Because most folks don't understand the in recovery implied part of it. So when we do advocacy work, especially as peers, a big part of our job is to reduce stigma and to model these recovery-centric dialects. So these days I just introduce myself as, hi, I'm Michelle. I'm a person in recovery. And for me, that means that I have been making meaningful changes in my life since September 15th, 2013. That was the day I first asked for help. And that was the day I really began this, what I call this braving journey. When the other Michelle at WEconnect asked me what I was going to speak about, I paused for a minute, but then it came to me that I was going to talk about braving. It was the obvious answer. So braving is an acronym that Dr. Brené Brown has developed that summarizes her findings around evidence-based ways to build trust. I am a data person. I want proof. I want concrete evidence. I want things to line up nice and neat, and life doesn't do that. But this type of evidence has really supported me in my recovery journey. Some things just didn't click before, but this makes sense. So it's become how a lot of people are familiar with, like a 10th step inventory, like a daily inventory. I do a braving inventory, and it's kind of my guidepost. So braving stands for boundaries, reliability, accountability, vault, integrity, non-judgment, and generosity. And those are kind of the core features to build trust. I had really lost trust in myself throughout my life. And so those qualities were inconsistent at best before I entered recovery, and now they're goals that I set for myself every day. Just like if you do an inventory, like a traditional inventory, right? Some days you're spot on with those qualities, and some days they need a little bit of work. But every day I've made progress. Every day since September 15th, 2013, there's been progress. Maybe not linear, but healing isn't necessarily linear. It doesn't all line up the way you want it to in nice little boxes. But I've been making progress. So to kind of do the traditional, what it was like, what happened, what it's like now. I grew up in a pretty affluent, upper to upper middle class town. We have a famous country club here. My dad is a very respected doctor. My mom was a nurse before we were born. I grew up with what we would call very innate high recovery capital. I had all of my needs met. I had a really great education. I had things that would support me in life. These are also, you might be familiar with social determinants of health. I had a pretty high score. I was very privileged that way. But from a young age, I was bossy. I was a preemie baby. Like, I came into the world just knowing what I wanted. I feel things intensely. I love the writer Glennon Doyle, and her new book's called Untamed. I was untamed for sure. I was wild. I could feel all my emotions. I had intense empathy. It's one of my superpowers, really. I really couldn't be broken. My younger brother, Sean, he's about 2 years younger than me. And when he was 2, he was diagnosed autistic. And just for a point of clarity for folks here, my family and I use capital A autism as in like capital D deaf. It's a part of advocacy and identity movement, kind of like alcoholic and addict inside of a 12-step meeting. So today we use that, but for many years, we didn't have that viewpoint. And it's, 20 some years later after Sean was diagnosed, we'd find out that I'm actually on the spectrum as well. But it wasn't picked up because I have what we would call high masking abilities. I can fit in. I was hyperlexic as a kid. I read and wrote early, all that kind of stuff. And growing up, my parents definitely did what they thought was best. They had used the best evidence of the time. In the 90s, much different than what we would say to do today. And they did an awesome job for what they thought was best. But just like a lot of us, my parents didn't have access to a lot of emotional knowledge. Going to therapy wasn't a normalized thing, but they wholeheartedly showed up. My parents didn't try to tame me, for better or worse. But it led to a lot of burnout in my family and led to a lot of resentment, and that's stuff that I held on to. And so I buried myself in school really early on. And it was someplace that I got a lot of positive feedback from. I was very smart, and I was kind of on that Ivy League track, and I was going to be a doctor like my dad. And in my mind, I was going to cure autism because autism was the worst thing in the world. It made my family miserable, and I didn't want anybody to go through that. And now looking back, I can see that what I actually wanted was, I wanted these tools of recovery. I wanted braving. I wanted to deal with the feelings. I didn't want to deal with the autism. Autism and neurodiversity has given people amazing gifts. My brother is so masterful at music. He has perfect pitch. He has intense focus. I do too. I have intense empathy as well. I think if it wasn't for neurodiversity, we probably wouldn't be sitting here on Zoom having this meeting and all this tech that we have. But I didn't know that. So I went all in on school. And my senior year of high school, I got in a really bad accident. I had added a team sport because I had always done kind of the solo things. I was in a school bus, and we got in an accident, and I got a really bad traumatic brain injury. And my life just kind of stopped. So, there come all of the doctors and the prescriptions that go with that. That Macklemore song, "The drug dealer was my doctor," like that was my life for a long time. So I didn't go to an Ivy League. I went to Pitt. I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So I went to Pitt, stayed close to my family. I had really amazing concussion doctors. But because I wasn't dealing with the emotional stuff, my substance use just took off. I got off track. I finished college with good grades, amazingly. But I stalled out after graduation, and I fell into a job working with kiddos who are on the spectrum because I knew it was easy for me, and I wanted to help. And then when I got into the system, I realized the system was pretty broken. And so then I wanted to fix the system. But it was really difficult for me to do that. And I still wasn't dealing with my feelings. I fell into a relationship with a guy I knew from college who also liked to use substances, and our entire relationship was built around that. And it just kind of went on like that for a while, until that night my cousin got married. There was some kind of family drama, and everybody was drinking a little too much. And then the next day I woke up and didn't quite know where I was. And I was having what my friends in recovery and I refer to as hangxiety, when you get that like intense anxiety after a hangover. And I just started walking down this country road, and I didn't know where I was, and I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew I could call one person in my life. My cousin she was in recovery. She's the only person I knew, and I called her and said, I need help. And so that day she got me into treatment, and that really started that journey. And from there I was in and out of different 12-step based treatment programs for a couple years. I, put a couple months together, but never stuck. And I never really found any type of happiness. I was still trying to fit into that mold. I wasn't respecting my own boundaries or my own integrity. I was judging myself. I didn't have that stuff that I have today. So, fast forward a couple years, I do a geographic for a fantastic job opportunity out to California. And I guess I should clarify, geographic change for those who aren't familiar with 12-step lingo, right? So I tried to solve my problems by picking up and moving. And I wouldn't say I was really involved in my recovery at that point. I was still trying to bury stuff with a new job and a new place, and then manage all the stress of running this program. And so very quickly things fell apart for me again. But I met a really great guy, but we were both in our addictions at that moment in time. So we got married really fast, trying to people please the way out of some situations, and things just continued to unravel. So I ended up quitting my job because I thought that would fix it, because I was still resistant to looking at me. And shortly after I quit my job, I went to, I first tried to go to IOP, that IOP I talked about almost getting kicked out of. And then when I tried to go back to work, and that wasn't fixing things, I spiraled out a little bit further. And it took a couple more months until I finally got so desperate And at that point, I had lost my health insurance. I had run out of money. I still had it a lot better than a lot of other people, but for me, it was a wake-up call. And the only place I knew I could go at that moment, when I didn't have money, when I didn't have access to treatment. So I went back to AA, to these ladies that I had met when I was, forced to go and get my slip signed, and I was so like huffy puffy about it. And the ladies there really, truly, I credit them with saving my life. The women in those rooms were phenomenal. And after about a week, I finally worked up the courage to call my mom and say, hey, like, I need to go back. And so I flew home to PA, to a treatment facility that I went to before, where I had the most success. And I had really good success there because it wasn't 12-step based. They still offered it, but it wasn't mandatory. Everything was voluntary. So, and it was very holistic. I mean, I'll be straight with you. It was pretty bougie rehab treatment facility. But the attitude there, the acceptance, this notion that harm reduction is an acceptable path of recovery, and that if all I wanted to do was reduce how much I was using, then that's okay. Like, we can work on that. And this was radical for me. So that was my hook. And at that point, I had been trying to intellectualize my way out of this situation. I had read every self-help book. I had read every 12-step text. I had done all of this stuff, but I wasn't living it. I wasn't practicing my integrity. I wasn't doing what was courageous over what was comfortable. I wasn't doing what was right for me over what was like fun, fast, or easy. And I was really professing my values instead of practicing them. So when I went back there, I had the opportunity to practice. And so this work, Brene Brown's work, is really where I started. And really with this braving, it was something that was manageable while my brain was still healing from the substance use and just, the emotional trauma as well. And I really latched on to it. I also learned about the 4 agreements when I was in this treatment facility. And that was something else that has really made a huge impact in my life and shifted the way that I see spirituality, because that was one of the big things that I rebelled against in the 12-step thing. So I could reframe it for me. And then since when I came back, a series of events unfolded, and my husband and I moved to Michigan, where he's from. And I decided I wanted to get out of the intellectual disability, autism world. And I was thinking about, doing this, working with other folks who were seeking recovery. And so I got a job at the local treatment center there. And they suggested that I go do this recovery coach academy thing. And I met this awesome guy named Kevin, and he introduced me to this awesome guy named Dean, who introduced me to this awesome guy named Robert. And the journey from that moment in Michigan of meeting these folks to here has been a whirlwind. It feels like it's been forever when it really hasn't been that much time. But this peer work that I do is, I feel, where I'm truly meant to be. When I was working in the treatment facility, I saw a lot of folks that I would have typically served in my disability, autism, behavioral health realm. And they're just being turfed back to the psych hospital and in and out, and nobody wanted to deal with them. And it really hurt my heart. And I knew I could make a difference, and I wanted to. And a lot of those folks that I identified as like, yeah, you're my people, would have really benefited from a harm reduction approach. And so that's where I met my wonderful friend and mentor, Dean Lemire, who is our senior recovery services manager. And he kind of took me under his wing and, taught me what I already know in a different package. And I think that's the amazing thing about this type of work, is whether it's substance-based or mental health or disordered eating or whatever it is, it's all the same work. Your story just might be a little different. So it's been pretty phenomenal to every day. Not only do I practice these principles of setting boundaries for myself, what's okay and what's not okay, very simply. I have the chance to be reliable. I don't overpromise anymore. And now if I do and I catch myself, I can be accountable for that. Like, I can own my mistake and say, I'm so sorry. Like, I really wanted to be a part of this. I really wanted to help, but I just don't have the bandwidth right now. So, I'm sorry, what can I do to make it right? I can hold secrets. I can be a vault. I won't share experiences that aren't mine to share. I don't, what did one of my therapists called it? Common enemy intimacy. So like, oh, you hate this person, let's talk. Like, I don't do that anymore, because I'm not striving to fit in. I'm looking for belonging. And these days I do have integrity, and I do what's right over what's fun, fast, or easy. It's so difficult for me sometimes, but I do. I work really hard every day for the non-judgmental piece, especially towards myself. I am my own worst critic, as many of us are. And I'm getting better about assuming positive intent and being generous. And that tends to happen when I have the other things in line, when I have my self-care taken care of, when I do the things I need to do. Every day I wake up, and first thing I do is I put on a little morning meditation to ease me into the day. Some days I actually fall asleep and then I wake back up and I start it again. And then I do a daily reading. I do a reading from an app called Storyteller by Morgan Harker Nichols. And I think she started off as like a Christian singer-songwriter or something, but she has a very spiritual but secular daily devotional, and it's with a beautiful piece of art. And we've actually modeled our women's meetings, our female identifying meetings. We welcome all individuals to identify as female. We do one of these readings, and people can share around that. And it's been a big hit to kind of have that common connection to. That's not a traditional 12-step based text. So that's been a really cool experience as well. And then after that, I get up and I do a little bit of yoga. I stretch, and then I start my day. I take care of, my pets or my therapy. They're my fur children. And my little old man sitting right here snoring away while we're doing this. And then I get to come to work with the most phenomenal human beings I've ever met. Our team, and WEconnect We show up and we trust each other, and we circle back when something goes wrong. We can be ourselves. We can support each other. I've never really worked in an environment that was more helpful than harmful. And the culture that we've built here, y'all have built at WEconnect, and then when WEconnect brought on our recovery services team that we're helping to keep going is it's just phenomenal. I wake up every day excited to serve others, to work with the members who use our app and use our peer services. And our team is just phenomenal. We actually have fun working on some really vulnerable and difficult topics. But there's always laughter, and there's so much support. And so, work is a big part of your life. And work-life balance, especially in the era of COVID, is difficult when everyone's working from home. And then our recovery services team is always remote, so we're always working from home. But we support each other in that. And we support each other to continue in our recovery, whatever that looks like for each of us. And it looks drastically different for every person on our team. And we all come together and share those experiences to make our service delivery so much better. I really struggled for a long time to find a definition of recovery that worked for me. And I've been super resistant to defining recovery until I think, December. And I was sitting in the Alano Club of Portland, and a slide comes on the screen for training, and the slide comes on the screen that says, recovery is an individualized, intentional, dynamic, and relational process involving sustained efforts to improve wellness. And our wonderful Robert Ashford, our Vice President of Recovery Services, published that definition last year. So I love it because it hits home for me. And it hits that this is evidence, this is data, and I can take that to the bank when there's so many things that are up in the air. And I love to be able to have that data and that evidence. And so it's evidence to me that what I'm doing for my recovery works, no matter what anybody else says, because my life has gotten phenomenally better by entering recovery. My life has become just unimaginably different. I would have never thought that I would be here tonight sharing my story. And I'm so wholeheartedly grateful that I get to. I can show up in a perfectly imperfect way. And y'all hold space for that. And we show up like that for each other. And it's just so wonderful to be braving this journey, this wilderness, this recovery process with all of y'all. So thank you so much for inviting me tonight, Murphy. Thank you so much for creating such an amazing idea. I don't think y'all knew that you were living out some harm reduction principles by meeting people where they're at and putting recovery in the palm of their hand when y'all started this. But I just love how welcoming and passionate and excited everybody is here about saving lives. I'm excited to be a part of this. and I'm excited to see where we go. So thank you so much. And that's all I have.
Myself. Okay, can you hear me, Michelle?
I can hear you.
Let's hear it for Michelle, everybody. Go bananas. I am so blown away. Thank you for your courage and your honesty and your willingness to share your story with everybody tonight and with me. I feel it. I feel it. I don't know if I'm frozen here. If I am, I apologize. Hopefully you can hear me. It sounds like I was frozen. I've got, we have a lot of people I see in the audience, and we have questions for you now, Michelle. This one's from Lisa, and that is, what advice do you have for those who also disagree with or defy the agreed upon the narrative that narrowly defines a binary or all nothing approach to recovery? Good luck answering that one.
Right. So a binary and all or nothing approach to recovery. So my gut answer is it just doesn't work. But there's tons of evidence showing why it doesn't work. There's no such thing as, let me backtrack. Nobody can define recovery for you, right? Everybody is in recovery if and when they say they are. So there's no such thing as black and white there. Recovery, in the same way that, sexual orientation and gender identity and expression, that's not a binary thing either. And in that same vein, recovery is not black and white or binary that way. And I would highly suggest people look up some articles by Ashford et al. If they want some more evidence on that.
Well, thank you. Do we have any more questions from the chat? If you do have questions, please throw them in the chat. I've got a question for you while we wait for our next question. I'll keep it simple, and if we don't get another question from the attendees, I've got a follow-up. So number one, a defining moment for you in active addiction. And I think you touched on it a little bit, but what was that defining moment? Was it Michigan? Was it the wedding? Was it back in California? Or there may have been a bunch of them. A lot of us have more than one defining moment, and they add up, and then eventually I'm faced with the truth. So the defining moment in active addiction, and have you had a defining moment along in your recovery? I can't imagine that I could say that I was in recovery while I was using, my drug of problematic use. So
yeah. So for me, I have multiple defining moments, right? There is like the ultimate inciting incident of the first time I asked for help. And then I would say, not the last time I asked for help, because I ask for help all the time, but that last time that I decided to go into inpatient treatment. And those are probably the two that stick out the most in my mind. And also moving to California, and realizing and thinking that was going to solve everything, right? That was a mindset shift for me. I was proven wrong, but it was a mindset shift as well. I would say defining moment for my recovery. There are three that come to mind right now. The first is Dean and I had a conversation on the lake in Michigan, just about philosophy of harm reduction and our stories, and where this harm reduction is going and where the recovery advocacy movement is going. And that really energized me to really move forward with peer work. Because at first I was just thinking peer work was something like I do on the side. And then that was really the moment where I decided to do it. And then he encouraged me. He's like, hey, if you can go to this conference in Pennsylvania, you should go. It's pretty close to your house. It's only a couple hours away. I know some people who will be there. You'll have a good time because I was going to start a job working for the county. And he's like, before you start your new job, go there. And so first night there, conference is just getting started. I didn't know anybody. And I was outside at the smoking pole, just like introducing myself to people. And I introduced myself to this guy named Devin and this woman named Brooke. And then this guy named Robert came out. We were all just talking. And then the next morning, and like really openly talking, having amazing conversation. And then the next morning I go to like get ready for the conference, and then like Devin and Robert walk up on the stage and they're like running the conference. I'm like, wow. People who work in this field, like these are my people, right? These are real, raw, vulnerable people who are willing to engage with anybody, meet people where they're at, and then go put on a conference for 1,000 people. And that was another big moment. And that was the moment then that led to us discussing WEconnect. So those are my 3 big ones in
Awesome.
recovery.
Awesome. Next question from the audience. How do you work with shame in recovery?
Murph, I think you froze. But I heard, how do you work with shame in recovery? So did I get the question? How do you work with shame in recovery?
Yeah, and is there other ways that you use Brené Brown's work in your recovery?
Yeah. I mean, there are 1.5 million tools that I use from Brené Brown. She wrote a book. She's doing a lot of work on leadership right now, and working with high-level organizations like Disney, Pixar, Apple kind of stuff. And so writing this leadership curriculum. And so I use a lot of those tools and practices and have for a while now. But in terms of shame, there are a couple of tools to use, but really the biggest thing about shame is just speaking it. And right, that's what we do here at these speaker meetings. That's why we go to mutual aid meetings, to talk about this kind of stuff. If you talk about shame, it loses its power, right? Some of y'all might be familiar with the concept of, if you talk about a craving, it reduces its power. It's the same thing, right? And so being able to identify it, and identify the triggers that are around it. I've had a lot of shame in recovery, and it's really taken me into working with certain folks, working for certain folks, to be empowered to own my story, and be empowered to live out loud about it. And it's something that I have to keep in check every day. Like just today, Dean and I forgot, there was a deadline for something, and somebody said something and I couldn't remember. And I just told Dean point blank, I'm starting a shame storm a little bit about the fact that I can't remember this because it was such an important thing. And so it's making me not want to ask for clarification, but I'm just going to suck it up and ask for clarification. And so I literally say that out loud. I speak it, I own it, and it takes it away and I can move on. And if I don't have the opportunity to speak it out loud to somebody, I'll journal it. I'll write it down, right? Because that's also another neurological process that gets it out of that part of your brain, so you can actually process it.
Awesome. Next question. What timeline works out? These questions are incredible. What timeline works out for initiation and implementation of a practical approach to braving the unknown territory of trying to establish a routine that leads to that lifestyle change?
Wow. So let me make sure I understood the question. So basically what I'm hearing is, what is a practical approach to using like these tools to get better lifestyle?
I could be getting this wrong, but it seems like, what's the timeline for initiation or implementation? It sounds like the time it takes to create a new habit, which is going to create, or those new rituals or whatever your practice for that will lead to a sticking lifestyle change. And I apologize if I've gotten that question wrong.
I mean, wouldn't it be fantastic if we could actually say that there was like a hard and fast timeline for somebody? That would make things so much easier.
Yeah.
But everybody's unique. You know, you hear the numbers thrown around that it takes 30 days to break a habit, 30 days to make a habit, 30 days to keep a habit. You know, I think that's kind of the logic behind, you know, in 12-step, they say do 90 and 90 meetings in 90 days. But it's just going to depend on the individual, right? Some people catch on to things faster than others. And that's okay. Some people, it takes more time. Some people might be ready to practice and like really be ready to do this. And for others, readiness has nothing to do with it at all. And so, you know, because that's another big thing that comes up a lot, right? Like, if you're ready, you'll get this. And that really doesn't have anything to do with it. A lot of it has to do with recovery capital. It has to do with your social determinants of health. Or social determinants of recovery. It has to do with the resources you have. You know, it's going to look a lot different for somebody like you or I, Murph, right, who we have all of these resources at our disposal, versus somebody who doesn't. They don't have access to, you know, some basic needs. That's going to be totally different. And so that's really where like my harm reductionist, you know, foundation comes in. That like you just got to meet people where they're at, and you can't put a timeline on it.
Yeah. Great answer. Do you use some of the skills you learned while working with children with autism into your role at WEconnect, and do you miss working in that field?
Yeah, so I miss my kiddos for sure that I work with. Kids are fun, right? Working with people is fun too, but kids just have this, right? There's a reason we use the phrase like childlike wonder. And, you know, I'd say that I do use some of those skills. You know, I mean, motivational interviewing, for example, is something that's seen across all types of mental health, substance use, intellectual disability, autism work. You know, but we don't do peer recovery support services. Is not about applied behavioral analysis and coercing somebody into doing anything, which unfortunately a lot of the treatment that insurance pays for folks with autism is ABA, and a lot of it's coercion. They don't really want to be doing it. Everything about peer-based services is voluntary. Everything about peer-based services is led by the person we are serving, we are working with. And so, you know, for me, that was my approach. And I would get in trouble, and I didn't last very long at certain jobs because of that. So, you know, I think a lot for me is the biggest takeaway is meeting people where they're at. That's the most important in any type of human service work.
All right, we've got 10 minutes left, and then we'll do a closing. But we've got thank you for that. This is a deep question. I don't know if it's deep, but we're going to get there. It's a bigger question. I know for myself, I have worked in the clinical setting until recently with a one-to-one.
Oh no. You'll come back.
Able to connect when needed. How do you feel your recovery coaching skills have changed? Hopefully you can hear me.
You cut out again. Can you repeat? I'm so sorry.
Yes. How do you feel your recovery coaching skills have changed? Do you feel that you are still able to reach the client effectively virtually?
Oh, yeah. So I missed the first part, but basically just the move to digital services.
Yeah, exactly. With the one-to-one interaction, face-to-face meetings, and being able to hug one another.
So, yeah, like the hugs parts are hard for sure, but I feel like the switch to digital services, in some ways, for some folks, I'm able to connect better because they're kind of disarmed, right? There's this space between, they're in their own space. And then we can message either on the WeConnect app or text. They can just kind of pick up the phone and call and check in a way that would probably not be standard practice in face-to-face services. There's that real-time interaction for some folks. It can be difficult for folks who are not as technologically savvy or a little resistant to it. But once we have those conversations over a platform they're comfortable with, whether it's phone, whether it's Zoom, you know, you build that rapport, right? The human connection is not lost. And that's the brilliant thing about this that I've really seen working at WeConnect. Even before COVID hit, we went digital. We were digital anyway. And before COVID, I was going into clinics sometimes and engaging with folks. But even the folks I had never met face to face, I think, you know, one of the ladies that I work with, Eli, met and, you know, introduced her to the app and introduced her to what peer services could be. We've never met face to face, and we have a phenomenal relationship. And she talks to me all the time about her goals and what's up in her life. And we can really offer social support in a different way than traditional services. There's an opportunity for that varied level of engagement that maybe would actually be a barrier to face-to-face services if people were resistant to coming in.
Thank you, Michelle. This is going to be our last question before my final question, and this is a great one. Recently, I received bad news that someone I sponsored years ago passed away. The last time I saw her, she was struggling a lot. I too work as a peer and found it difficult to help her at that time. What are the barriers you face as a peer recovery support specialist? And how do you not feel guilty when you can't reach or connect with someone?
It's tough. There are barriers to connecting with folks sometimes. And sometimes that's no fault of your own. There might not be anything you could have done. Recovery is dynamic, and it's going to look different for everybody at any point in time. And sometimes as peers, we're not clinical, we're not therapists. There are certain things that we can't do. We can offer support and not, harm reduction type of unconditional love. But sometimes there are some things that are bigger than peer support. Just the same way, that in sponsorship. I know people have expressed that, right? There are some things that are bigger than that, and we can only do the best we can to try and connect people with resources that can really address what they need and be those resource brokers. But when those losses happen, and unfortunately they do, it's part of what we deal with. It's important to take care of yourself in your own recovery. If you aren't currently seeing a therapist for, maybe that's the time to reach back out and maybe get a couple sessions of grief counseling. Or if you have a peer yourself, work with them, lean into your recovery program, whatever that looks like for you. It's difficult. There's no easy way around that type of loss. My heart's with whoever shared that.
Okay. Thank you so much. My last question, we're running out of time. Shocker that I would go over. And no, it's not a shocker for anyone that knows me. I've overshot a lot of marks in my life. And that's hopefully we'll finish on time. It's late on the East Coast. You mentioned your life is unimaginably different than it was when you're in active addiction, or however you want to describe that. How is it unimaginably different? I have my experience with that. So I'd love to hear yours.
I mean, for one, right, like somebody wants to hear what I have to say. For real, I was asked to do this. I was asked to speak on a podcast because somebody believed in what I had to say during my story. I can show up every day, regardless of my struggles with my mental health and my mental illness. And then on days when I literally take a mental health day, right? And I'm able to do that, and and I can take a day and I can reset and I can do what I need to do. I'm financially stable again. My parents are able to be more financially stable because they don't have to support me. My dad is like the least frugal doctor ever. He almost got kicked out of physician parking one time because they didn't believe he was actually a doctor with his truck. And the other day, he was able to go out and buy a new truck because Michelle's paying all her bills. My dad's he's a pulmonary doctor. And with COVID, things got a little scary, and we realized we need to reassess my parents' will and guardianship for my brother in case something happens. And my parents trust me to put me as my brother's primary guardian. And those are things that wouldn't have happened 5 years ago. Yeah. The financial, I don't have a mansion, but I have a wonderful house that I can afford. I wake up and I go to a job every day that I'm excited to do. And I'm finding some serenity.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. That's a beautiful answer, and just awesome. You inspired me and added to my life today. So for that, I am grateful. In closing, let's hear it for Michelle, Reilly, everybody, for being our guest tonight. All of us at WEconnect Health Management and Recovery, WEconnect Recovery Live are honored to have had you here tonight. We're so grateful.
I'm so grateful.
Safe and a healthy road to recovery. Just a reminder, if you'd like to have more information, or you'd like more information about WEconnect or peer services, you can visit our website at www.weconnectrecovery.com. Look at Michelle dancing. I love it. That is one joyful young lady. Where you can also find a recording of this talk within the next week. And tell everybody you know, if you've liked what you've heard today, spread the word. We're going to do this once a month, and if it grows, we'll do it twice a month. Michelle, thank you so much. And I'm wishing everybody a beautiful, blessed weekend.
Thanks, Murphy. Appreciate you so much.
Thank you.